This is Decentral Lens, distilling the crypto news you need to know and why.
All right. What's up, everybody? This is Blue Toshi and my co-host Disco on Decentral Lens.
Hello, hello.
So we have an exciting show for you today. One of my favorite people in the space and a fellow shroom holder who I met months ago. We talk all the time, but I love his candor and, dare I say, Skigod, brashness in the face of, like, you know, I just love it when we're Pico runes bear. You're just like, guys, you're all just coping here. Like, quit coping. Like, stop coping. Here are the numbers. Look at the charts. Like, quit getting emotional here. So, you know, I love, I don't want to say contrarian takes, but just like people who are like, and the opposite also. It's like when things appear they couldn't be worse, you're like, what are you all doing? Like, quit panicking. I'm buying. Like, I'm gobbling all this crap up. I'll be wrong, you know, maybe on 8, but those 2 hopefully will moon and I'll do well. So tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you got into this space, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, first caveat with that is like one of my favorite memes. One of my favorite memes is memes are the GOAT, right? Memes just say the best stories. But you know that meme where it's like the fat dude with the glasses and the chart's just down only, and then it's like up 1%, and he's just like, oh, you know, like,
he zooms in for the hour and says like, dude, yeah, we're up 13%.
Yeah. That's why I can't help myself but like attack these people, because like it just always ends up being like a nothing burger, right? And that's why I always talk about how I want to see like a broad swath of bids, but like, come on, like we've seen this for years and years, and I can't help, like, a little bit of it is my frustrations, right? My frustrations, just like everybody else's, get released onto X, and people just happen to be on the timeline with some little post that's like, they'll post like my favorite is when they do like outperformance posts, like their one meme coin is like up 5% on the day and everything else is down 10%. They're like, you know, if you understand, study this or whatever. I'm just like, dude, I fucking hate you so much. Like, I can't help myself.
And if we're listening to those folks, like, God help us. Like, if we're FOMOing in to a 24-hour up 13% when the 1 month is down 89%, be like, not gonna make it, dude. Come on.
Yeah, like Benjamin Cowan's probably the league leader in this, where he's like a Bitcoin dominance guy, and he's just been right for years about Bitcoin outperforming pretty much every asset. But anytime there's a pop where that one asset will outperform Bitcoin for like a 2-week period, he just gets annihilated. And then, you know, he'll come back on Twitter months later and be like, how you doing, buddy? Like, and then he'll just like, you know, kind of raid down he actually has been quite right. But yeah, so like, I don't mind being wrong or like buying at the wrong time or whatever, but I want it to be like my mistake. You know, I don't want it to be influenced by like a few things I see on the timeline, and I'm like, you know, I'm stuck 20%, 30% on my bags, and I see a few timeline posts that kind of add up to like this idea, and like I just get influenced to go click buy on something. Like, all of those have always been regretful, right? Like, that's not part of my plan. That's not who I am. I don't know why they entered. Like, one of my favorite trading quips or whatever is, if you don't have a reason to get into the trade, you're not going to have a reason to get out of the trade. So like, if you don't really know why people are getting in and you don't when they got in or at what price, like, you're not going to know when to get out, or when is the narrative changed, or why is the thesis wrong now, or why is it even better and maybe you should be done. You don't know any of that because you just allowed that overwhelming sense of like, I need to get back to this number, you know, like, and that like lives in all of us. Like, I know you said like I take emotion out of it, dude. I'm one of the most emotional traders out there. Like, you should see the people I work around. It's like I'm a joke compared to them.
Is that why you're in crypto, like, now? You got spit out of the TradFi and now you're here with the rest of us degens?
I'm still there. It's just one of my favorite, like, also things, not to get straight into it, but
Let's go.
is the ability for people to work through the stages of grief, right? So you have um, like I have to obviously remember these. You have like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, right? And you go through all of
Yeah.
those on like every little decision you make. And I think what the best traders do is they go through that very quickly and they reach acceptance way faster than everybody else. Whereas like it takes me, depending on how much money I've risked, like much time, I'm like, no, like it's gonna work out. And then I'm like, angry about it because I'm like, why the fuck did I do that? And then I'm bargaining, like, please just get back to like my entry price and
Yeah,
I'll
just
like get
half.
out.
Give
I
me
swear I'll
half
never
back.
do it
Just
again.
half.
Yeah. And then it's like depression where you're just starting to feel that numb feeling and you finally started to like get towards the bottoming process, which is like where you just accept that like it's gone. That money is gone. That decision was stupid. And like you then have to make the choice of like, do you learn from that or are you just going to keep doing that over and over until you're broke, and I feel like the best
Wow.
traders that I know, um, they just move through that process fast, accept it, and then move on into like a clearer decision rather than, and they learn from that and don't let it happen again because they recognize that spot when it comes up the next time. And it still
So ba-
happens. I still fuck up all the time, but that's the point.
so basically, just accelerate the grief process and come to terms as soon as possible to that last stage of accepting it and move on. I know I'm probably the most guilty there. I'm still holding things that, oh, I'm bargaining, thinking it's going to come back, knowing full well in reality it's not. So that's a great way to kind of tee this up for sure.
That sounds like great golfers would, or great traders would make great golfers. Like I'm notorious, like birdie,
Trust
par,
me,
par,
no,
par,
dude. I'm
and
not
then
good.
I'll have one bad shot, and then I'll be like, this hole doesn't matter, and I'll get like a 9, So it's like par, 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 9, and then back. I'm like, the next hole doesn't matter. But every single little bit and every single little moment, counts and kind of your decision. Yeah. So, how did you transition? How did you, like, I know there's a lot of traders in crypto, and the beauty of this space is, we get to hang with, I think I always tell Disco, like the zeitgeist of cool culture. And even though a lot of us are super nerds is here because coders get to hang out with artists, get to hang out with traders, get to hang out with content creators or whatever we are. Like there's so many facets to being in this space and learning. What's kind of your journey? How did you get into this?
Yeah, the quick version is basically I was a poker player for like, I don't know, 5-6 years or something, and I basically was okay at poker. The game started to get very difficult, and I did not get better. Nor did I want to work at getting better because I actually knew what it would take to get better. And I don't know if you guys play poker, but it's a game that's, if you want to be the cream of the crop in poker, like anything, you have to basically spend just as much or if significantly more time off the table playing, working on your game, learning kind of like range charts and kind of diving into your own game, finding out what's exploitative and trying to plug those leaks. It's like Pareto's law, right? You could get like pretty good at poker. You could get 80% of it or whatever and be like a decent winning player at like
and beat your
small
buddies
stakes
and stuff.
But
or
yeah, you could be that cool guy who like maybe beats your buddies at home game a lot and like goes to Vegas once every other year and plays the main event. But like you're never going to be a world-class player. And when you start to play world-class people, you quickly understand how much worse you are because like anybody can run good for a little bit, but over time you're going to get your ass handed to you. And I was just like spinning my wheels, just accepting like, oh, I'm okay. Like I think I can make 6 figures at this over and over, but like the game kept getting good and my expense, like my lifestyle creep just kept going. And eventually I was losing and I was just like depleting all of my net worth very quickly, living and partying in San Diego and stuff. So luckily I got a random message from a friend who was a poker player turned trader. shout out to Gregory. If you guys want a good follow on X, you type in Gregory. He's a soul guy. But anyways, he ended up working in the trading world and kind of reached out to his poker network and was like, "Hey guys, this is very similar to poker. You might want to think about looking into this." So I kind of was like, my back was against the wall. My net worth and my bankroll was depleting. I was like pretty lost as to what to do, because once you start playing poker, you break the mold of that kind of like normal life, and you're like, I don't really ever want to work a normal job again, right? Like I've tasted the kind of free life, and I've now met a lot of people who have this life that's like, I don't want to go work and climb some ladder or whatever. I just don't want to do that. So, call it fate, whatever. Found my way into this job, had a good interview, and it took, a year and a half of learning from absolute zero. Didn't know what a bid was, what
before
an
you
offer
get
was.
sorry to interrupt, before you get too much in the trading, I just want to ask a question that I'm super curious about. When did you know? I assume most of this is Texas Hold'em because that's the game you play, right? What were those things? It sounds like you almost have to like be very, not only know the odds, but be very self-realized and actualized. Like I'm sure I have a tell, be like, like itching my face and be like, I got a pair of aces, like, holy shit. When did you know, or what are some of those, like, as you go and have to walk that more narrow path to plug those holes, as you say, to be better and better, like, what are those things that you have to do? And when did you know that it was like, shit, like this is like driving me, almost like I almost see people getting OCD and neurotic and not being able to focus on anything else. But when was that moment for you? And what are some of those patches that were just like, you're like, I'm out?
Yeah. The quick kind of thing I tell people that aren't super into poker, but kind of vaguely know a little bit about it, is like, when they get into the tell thing, right? They've seen these movies. They have their friends who could swear that they saw something and maybe they were right one time. But like, poker is an exploitative game. So like, I think the most powerful thing you could do to level up your poker game, if you guys were playing, right? You're going to be drinking, you're going to have a good time or whatever. But the best players are paying attention to information that is being revealed to them along the way, even if they're not necessarily playing a hand. So if you two are in a hand versus each other, right? Blue Toshi and Disco are in this big pot, and I'm there, I'm chatting away, I'm drinking, I'm not in the hand, right? So theoretically, like, nothing's going on for me. But like, I'm watching everything. I remember how this hand went down, right? I've played millions of hands of poker. So like, I remember that Blue Toshi re-raised pre-flop and Disco called. Okay, well, I've played with Blue Toshi a little bit. I've maybe have a vague idea of the certain amount of hands that he would re-raise with pre-flop. Okay, so that eliminates a ton of hands, right? Probabilistically, you're now down to a chunk of hands, right? And same thing with Disco. Like, what types of hands are you going to call with? Okay, now the board comes out, right? And you decide, I'm going to bet here. And then Disco calls. And then the turn comes and you decide to check. Like, all these little kind of decisions are being made, right? And at the end of the hand, let's just say you went all in and Disco called and you were bluffing, right? Like, you were like, you got me. Ha ha ha. Disco's like, yeah, you suck, dude. Give me your money, right? Like, it's all fun and games, but I just got a shit ton of information in that one hand where I understand what you re-raised pre-flop. I understand what type of board you felt comfortable betting on the flop. I understood why you checked the turn. And then why did he decide to bluff all in here? Was it because the board was probably like a high EV play for him to do so? Or was he just like, no, I want to get Disco this hand. I don't really care what's out there, right? And like, why did you decide on that bet size? Why didn't you go with it? Whatever. So I'm taking it all of this information, right? So that later on, and it sounds more complicated than it is, right? Like, once you do a lot of this, it's all like just very much coming in quickly.
Like,
but now, fast forward an hour and we get into a hand and you re-raise me pre-flop. Well, I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, like let's rewind in my head to that
like
last.
He's got a pattern, not a great pattern here, and I can triangulate where his hand may be because if he has a really good hand, he's being a little more aggressive as a rookie player. But here he's
Right.
like, this is, so the bluff is where you could just decimate someone.
Well, in this case, you were very aggressive with a bluff, right? So if we're playing a hand and you took just as aggressive of a line versus me, I might narrow that. You said it right. You're narrowing the range down to the highest probability and then trying to make a decision based off that information. So if you played the hand very similarly and the board came out very similarly and you did the same things, well, I'm going to lean towards, if it all kind of looked the same, I'm going to lean towards your bluffing. Right. So I might not need as strong of a hand to call you down. And that might be one of those scenarios where I call you with just like ace high or a pair. And everybody's like, oh my God, how did you do that? He went all in. Like he should have had, you only called it with a bottom pair. Well, I'm like, I'm not going to tell them like, well, yeah, it was because of a pattern he showed and I'm exploiting that pattern. Right. But if you played that hand more passively, and you were a little bit more cautious, I might be like, oh, interesting. Maybe he actually has a good hand here and he's not exactly sure how to proceed in this situation. So I'm going to be a little more careful, even if I have a stronger hand. So like to me, it's the bet sizing, it's the timing, it's the patterns that you show are how better poker players become really, really good. But you didn't even know any of that was going on with me because I'm drinking a fucking Modelo in the side, just laughing and shooting the shit, right?
Seemingly like you're being super chill, but so you're saying these best guys are just like, the rookies obviously are just marks and they're dead in the water, but you're saying even to the mid to upper mid guys, they're gonna find your weakness and eventually they're gonna play. Obviously anybody on the final card in the flop can get that lucky, third king or whatever and beat you, but you're just narrowing the odds. So your chances of losing and your risk become less and less the better the player you are. And that's why the same players continuously get to the top tables and win a lot.
Whoever is best at narrowing the range down and being pretty damn good at that and like seeing it over and over are going to be the best players. And then you throw on the little cherry on top, which is if you're really good at doing it while being likable and people want to play with you, right? A lot of people hate the like sunglasses and hoodie and stuff like that because not only do they know you're good, but like you're almost insulting them by like not talking to them and just being in this kind of cave of a hoodie and being like it's almost so narcissistic. So if you can find the guy that's drinking with you in Vegas but he's also really good, but he makes you feel like, oh, I want to play with James. Like he's just fun to play with. Like he gives the action, he takes the action, but in reality, I'm making a lot of good decisions. Those are the people that are the scariest. And those are the people that win the most money in the highest stakes games privately. Usually it's private games. And that's like Dan Bilzerian. He's a big topic and people are like, no, like you're not that good at poker, like blah, blah, blah. But they have no idea that you don't need to be the best in the world. But if you're pretty damn good and all of the worst rich people love playing with you, you can win. You can win $100 million and nobody's going to believe you because Dan Bilzerian probably can't compete with the best autistic nerds of the the circuit, whatever.
Quants.
But he's not playing them. He's playing Hollywood actors at a casual Friday night game and they got, escorts all around. So you have this poker is like really interesting. I think it's fascinating. It's social dynamics, but it's also like this massive like narrowing of ranges and pattern recognition. And yes, the self-awareness comes back to like, are you being exploited over and over? And do you know that, right? I knew that. I was playing against good players and I was realizing like these guys are just owning me in all of these like spots that I shouldn't be getting owned.
So you at least were smart enough in your journey to know in hindsight or right after the cards were revealed, like I just completely got like engineered there. So you were realizing like, if I want to ladder up, like this has to be all in, and you're already like, my bankroll's going down. This is high risk. And it doesn't feel, I assume it does not feel good to lose.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good to lose, but like it also, just like in trading or anything, like if you decide this is what you're gonna do for life as a guy and you're just constantly losing at it, like it's just pretty depressing. And certain people, like I tend to shy away from attacking it and getting better. And certain people like that. Certain people like their backs against the wall and they're like, yeah, I have this chip on their shoulder. I'm a little bit more of a bitch, you know. I kind of backed away and I was just like this isn't exactly for me. Like I don't want to get better. I don't want to prove myself to these guys anymore. I tried, I failed. And like I like poker, but I knew it was going to take 3 to 4 years of like high end coaching, really looking into my own
Wow.
game, not so much other people's games, but like my own game, and figuring out where are all those spots that are easily exploitable of myself. And I just wasn't ready to do that, dude. I was like 25. Like I just was like enjoying drinking and like just doing whatever. So
So
trading
transition.
luckily was
Yeah,
easier.
so transition with that, now that we have a really good feel for like the poker player's mindset and your early successes and failures at a younger age doing this and realizing it wasn't for you. T- get us into now. It's your buddy who you mentioned earlier got you into trading, said it's actually a good uh, it's good for poker players to
Transition.
turn into traders. Yeah, it's a great. Thanks, Disco. Great transition. Bring us over to trading now and kind of how your skills evolved and kind of what you did there.
Yes. So like take the intangible skills of a poker player. So bankroll management, pattern recognition, the ability to take risk, the ability to watch a lot of different things moving at once and figuring out where is the action, where's the opportunity, where's the exploit. Let me go attack that one spot, right? Especially if you played online poker, which I did a lot of. So it's very similar cadence. What's nice is there's a schedule to it. We all say like, oh, we want 24/7 markets. Like, I don't know, bro. Like I've traded a long time and like I don't know if you know what you're asking for because you'll never be able to turn off. Like it's one of those, once you see it, you can't unsee it type of things. So,
Right.
um, the one thing I'm glad about trading it is that it was very hard, and I didn't win for a year and a half. I think maybe almost 2 years, and I'm super happy it went that way because just like in poker, just like in trading, if somebody comes in and they just get a massive win right away, like it's going to be detrimental most of the time because they're not going to have the awareness or clarity to be like, wow, I was really fortunate in that spot. I'm not
Right.
even that experienced and they just handed me a bunch of money. Maybe I should take a step back, reevaluate what went right there, talk to some people about it, and then I'm going to start at a lower spot and be so thankful that I have this huge bankroll to play with. Nah, dude, like you're
I was
gonna
gonna say no.
go post on X like you're a meme god. It's a meme coin super cycle. People just don't get it. It's pricing internet culture. Like blah 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 blah. Here's my top 5 picks. And like over time, they're just gonna like most again. There's anomalies. I get it. Most of them are gonna kind of go down over time, and I think that's worse than starting out losing, figuring out how to not lose, and then figuring out how to win, which
So
is
in
what
the
I did.
trading world, it was a year and a half for you before you won. Take us to that moment when what did you have to change? What were those ahas to get you from figuring it out, just like in poker, where this one you were a little older, more mature, you knew you had it in you. What changed in trading, in TradFi trading, that made you successful finally?
One was like ego is like such a huge thing everywhere, right? Like I still have an ego, of course. Like everybody, especially in this space, has an ego. You start to get followers, maybe some attraction. Like it's hard to really break away from that. But one nice thing about trading is that you're only always trading against yourself. Like you don't see anybody across the table from you like you did in poker, right? Like it's just this vast array of entities all making decisions and you don't exactly know why or when or you just are you get a lot of information but you get no information at the same time, so really the only place you could sit back and reflect is on your own gameplay and figuring out like you have to ultimately take the responsibility, right, and figuring out
Yeah.
like why. So yeah, and that took me a while, and like you think you can exert control over markets, you can bring the game to yourself, like you could force it. Like in poker, sometimes you could get away with that with like a very aggressive, solid player. But not in trading, it's really hard to think. I'm not a guy with $1 trillion fund who can move markets, right?
Right.
Like
Larry Fink.
I'm a little tiny minnow in this massive pond, just hoping not to die. Like, right? There's all these bigger fish out there. So my whole goal is just like one thing is like I started with equity markets. Like I started with like NASDAQ, S&P 500, the Dow, and the Russell 2000. And I thought like, oh, okay, like I should be able to figure this out in no time. And what I didn't realize is that like those are some of the most liquid, professionally played hard games in the entire world.
And I assume the high frequency trading and because every pension fund, just like we have more for the pension fund, they just gobble more of those big aggregates up. So is it the high frequency trading and that everybody's buying these? You're like, that's the mega whales game.
Yeah, so everybody has different strategies, right? Like I'm a scalper, I'm like a day trader. So I'm looking for inefficiencies in markets or specific players that I can like see in a market and be like, wait a second, that's an anomaly. What's going on there and how can I take advantage of that? Similar to poker, right? Like why is he playing this hand differently than I'm used to seeing him play, right? And trying to figure that out. Whereas like the HFT guys, a lot of them are just doing arbitrage across markets, right? They don't care about me. They don't care about Bill Ackman. They're whatever. They're just trying to be like this market and this market are usually aligned and correlated, and now they're not. So we're gonna like play the arbitrage back. Then you have like trend following. Then you have big players who are developing these huge positions, right? So like my whole like career is just staring at these markets, figuring out who's who, and like let's say I find those market makers, right? Which most of the order books that I look at are market makers, like 98%, right? HFT liquidity providing market makers. I could essentially, it's like a math equation. You could cancel out the two things that are on each side, right? So if I see a market maker on the offer and a market maker on the bid, and I know that they're not trying to like do anything specifically in this market, they're just arbitraging pennies here and pennies there. Right. I could essentially like remove them right now.
You're never going to play that game because they're just too big, because they have to do fractional pennies in the billions of trades to make their million a day or whatever it is.
Exactly. So I'm not playing against them, right? I'm looking for maybe some paper that's like heavy on the offer, heavy on the bid, that's like more obvious. So like maybe it's been sitting there for a month. Well, oh, that's interesting. Like, well, I could trust that that's probably a real order. Do I think the market is due for a turn for whatever reason I have in my mind? Do I think that do I think the market's going to go through that? So I actually want to like buy through that? Like all of these kind of things, I'm picking and popping, trying to figure out these strategies. And just like any trade you guys have ever had, like you might find a good trade, but that trade will be found by everybody else and it will be gone, right? Because once you start fighting for trades, the edge gets marginal until that trade is gone, and the ability to transfer on to the next trade or find the next opportunity is what can make or break people. Which is why like when people, you see on YouTube or you see on Twitter, like these people that have this strategy, like there is no silver bullet and there will never be a silver bullet, because like if one trade works, these are the best, smartest, most funded people in the world. They will find that trade and they will just dice it to bits until it's gone. And somebody will make a lot on that trade, somebody will lose a lot, and then then it's gone. It's over. So like you got to go find the next one. So like my ability is to show up every day, hope that you see something, or that there's like some crazy move, or that there's some inefficiency or whatever. Try to exploit that. Come back the next day, do the same thing, and if you could do that for year after year after year after year, like you're gonna make money. But I couldn't find those for like a year and a half, right? I just didn't get it. I was trying to battle the market makers. I was trying to use chart lines and like, support and resistance, and try to like all these just throwing shit at the wall.
Or these high frequency guys have, it's all like AI automated now, like good luck with that. They're already
Yeah.
ahead
Like,
of it's like what's the precogs in Minority Report, like they've already they're already reading the future, and probably there's some insider stuff too, like you're
totally.
playing against the mega whales and the the Long Island guys and the New York and Wall Street. Like that's tough. So a year and a half later, you finally found. So what was that first TradFi market that you found that turned everything around?
Well, one thing that happened is I remember a meeting I was in specifically where I saw somebody else make a trade. Like I visually like saw it, right? Which I never really do. Everybody keeps to themselves. And I saw the trade and I was like, oh, like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. Like I literally never thought about it. It like blew my mind wide open as to like how I could look at things. I was so like tunnel visioned thinking this was the only thing I could do. But like once I saw that, that opened it up. And then there was a lot of oil trades in like 2015 that started to work really well. So I remember starting to kind of catch some momentum in oil. And then in August 2015, the Chinese devalued their currency. Now, mind you, in 2015, I wouldn't even know what the definition of devalue means, right? Like, I don't fucking know any of that stuff. Like, somebody was on the trading floor and they were like talking about, oh yeah, like we're probably gonna have a limit down on Sunday morning in the
Right.
stock market because the Chinese devalued their currency. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but I heard you say volatility, and like, I'm in. So that week in August 2015, I made like 100K in trading. And mind you, I was like already almost broke coming into trading and moving to Chicago. But like a year and a half, 2 years in, I was like very broke, right? I only had a few months left, man, before like I had
Wow.
to
So your
pack it
runway
in.
was ending. You're like, God, am I going to have the
Oh,
same?
yeah.
I'm just a crappy poker player, trader. Like, shit, I don't know what I'm
Everything
doing.
sucked.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything sucked.
So you figured out this oil
Mixed in a little
trade.
breakup there. It was a real nice cocktail for some help. But yeah.
Oh, you must have partied after that one. So you found this oil trade. Was it like if the news if the winds had blown the other way first, would have you got like, was there a little bit of luck there, or no, this was like you zeroed in on this trade, you get in, you get out fast, you kind of found a niche way of looking at it from your friend blowing your mind, and like you started figuring out like, wow, there's a lot of stuff, rocks not overturned by the big high frequency guys and Wall Street guys, that you can kind of become a specialist and win.
Yeah, it's the stuff they don't care about, right? Like the irrelevant stuff to them, little settlements, little trades like that. I would say that the most important thing was visually seeing some different strategies. Like I think just with that, and you give me a little time, barring the oil, barring the Chinese devaluation, I would have made it, right? Because enough stuff started popping up as opportunity that I started being like, oh, that's edge. Like that's edge. So I was starting to get it. And then on top of that, we got these like couple really good spots. And that just blew the door wide open. And once I had that 100K week and I finally got a bonus check and I had some money in the bank, like my whole mind was finally like, oh, thank God. Like
Right, you're not paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. Like I got 50, 60K in the bank now. And like I could just go to work and not feel like I'm like on death's door. Right. And then from 2015 to like 2019 before COVID, it was just like smooth sailing up and to the right.
Wow. Yeah. Disco and I are both company founders, and Disco, I'll never forget, because he started a company in his 20s. I didn't start my first one until my 30s. And Disco, it sticks with me this day. He said, when you start a company, and you're obviously you're spending a lot more than you're making by setting up and just not having revenue from a corporation. And he'd always say, oh, Mr. Scary's in the mirror. Like it was always like, it's almost like a horror movie. Like you look in the rearview mirror and there's, from Friday the 13th, like there's Jason Voorhees like about to kill you. And, obviously the longer on you go, I'm in year 16, Disco's bought and sold a couple of companies. Like, Mr. Scary never goes away, but now I think I'm a couple counties ahead of him. You know what I mean? Like I feel better about Mr. Scary.
Yeah. I think one of the big parts of it that I'm just getting from this conversation is like, you almost have to, FUD yourself, right? Like you have to look at your you know, your weaknesses and be very honest with yourself about that. And that's the progression. And I think that, looking at one of the things you said really struck me as interesting. You were talking about, when you got into it and you started looking at like the S&P or this or that, and you referred to them as different games. So it's like you almost have to find like the table that you're interested in and that works for you, and kind of you're having your background and then looking at it from that perspective, I think is helpful. And frankly, for anybody watching this and getting in, I think it's just really good to kind of just go back and recognize that you're not just going to jump in and figure it all out. And you have to go through that process of fudding yourself. And I feel like I've been going through that, looking at, kind of my time in this space, where it's always like, yeah, dude, I get a little too excited about this, or I'm holding on too long for this, or I'm looking at this, or maybe I should stop following them, because you start, really getting influenced by what you're doing. So I'm riveted by the story, but I really think that whole notion of Mr. Scary and everything is when you're really gut checking yourself, like, dude, is this worth it? Is this going to play out? And am I doing the right thing and being true to where I want to go? So I'm fascinated by the conversation.
To add on to your point, and I'm glad you circle back to that. Table selection is like, it's like the Dan Bilzerian thing, right? He's not picking the table with the hardest players in the world. He's picking the table with the easiest players in the world, right? And it's the same thing in markets. Like you need to be brutally honest with yourself. Like, I had to admit, I don't know how to beat the equity markets, but I'm doing pretty well in gold, and like live cattle actually was a product that I was doing really well. And like, maybe I should focus on those more. So recognizing your weaknesses is great, but what you're asking, like, what are some of the turning points for me?
Yeah.
This is one I always feel like, is I saw a Gary V video in like 2017 or something, and he was like, everybody's so focused on their weaknesses and figuring out how to like solve that, and he's like, nobody doubles down or triples down or quadruples down on their strengths. Like, they just assume their strengths are like peak performance, and he's like, no, like, if you were at like peak performance at your strength, you'd probably be close to best in the world at something, and you should be. And I was like, like, that's a good point. I'm always so worried about all the other traders around me and what they're winning money in and what strategies they're thinking about. And this guy knows macro, and that guy's an amazingly aggressive trader or whatever. And I was like, I had to look deep down and be like, okay, I'm not too good at equities. I'm not that aggressive of a guy. I don't know macro for shit. What am I good at? What I was good at, and I always have been, is like really, really small risk, really good at holding trades, and like consistently winning over time while being able to pay attention to a lot of things at once. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to start doing that, and I'm going to start to size up, because if I had like maximized on my strengths, I would be trading like 200, 300, 400 lots on these things and just absolutely crushing the game. But I'm not. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong over here, wrong over there. And for crypto guys, it's like, maybe inherently they're like a Warren Buffett, and they don't really want to be trading meme coins, but they just feel pulled to because everybody else that they talk to is doing it. But like
FOMO,
the real truth in your skill set is acquiring over time, sitting there doing nothing, maybe scrolling on X just for the fun of it. And then in 10 years, you could click the exit button or whatever your goals are. And that is the peak performance for you. Whereas some of these guys who live on X and they're 24 and they're just deep in the trenches and they have 30 Telegram chats, like, all right, I get it. Meme coins are going to be your strength. And if you can learn how to trade effectively and size up and all that, you're going to fucking murder it. Because these are such illiquid, retail-driven markets, and if you kind of learn to exploit that, you'll be good. But I'm not. So like, here we are trying to pull back from the memes, right? Like, trying to stay in my lane. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And this has been fascinating to us, this progression of, because I know one of the first NFT projects I got into, one of the women in that space in Nuclear Nerds Disco was a poker player. I think there's a lot more of you folks
Yeah.
in this space than we think. And the fact that you went from there to trader. So let's transition you now from like TradFi trader. Obviously, you're very active in the crypto space. You do a lot of great posts. Obviously, you're very active in the Bitcoin Shrooms community, which is, obviously I'm biased. It's one of my favorites and one of the most OG. So take us in the transition in crypto. What were you, Bitcoin or Solana first?
ETH
Oh,
probably.
you were ETH first. So you got into ETH when? 2018, 2019?
No, I would say the guys who I trade with and like most of our kind of trading floor, we started buying Bitcoin and ETH in like 2013,
Oh,
whatever.
okay.
20.
So you're early. Okay. So you've been
Yeah.
around a while. Now, did you buy and
Yeah.
hold a bunch from the early days?
Yes and no. Like, I did okay, but I have all my story about giving some back and here and there. But
Sure.
yeah, I did really well. My best play was the 2020 move. That was much more aggressive, much more. I knew a lot more at that point, and I was able to really unload the clip there when we fell down to like 4,000. But the funny ETH story is like this is the guy who's not super aggressive, the one who doesn't know macro, like the guy who's a little bit inherently afraid. I took to my friends when ETH was $11. I'll never forget this, but like ETH was $11, and I was like, guys, I'm thinking about putting like 10K into ETH or something, and like what do you think about that? And they were like, don't you have like way more money than that, like in general? And I was like, yeah, but like I don't know much about this. And I got trolled endlessly for days, and it was basically like either don't buy anything and cope that way, or buy 100K and shut the fuck up.
Wow.
Because if you buy 10K, you're gonna hate yourself if it does well, and if it does poorly, like it's not like that big of a deal anyway. It's kind of insignificant. So they were like, you should either go for it or not. And I was like, wow, guys, that's like really sound advice. So I'm going to go ahead and buy 10,000. Right? So I just did
Well,
yeah,
you played your game too. And obviously in hindsight, you wish you'd have done 100 grand, but you did 10, and it's, I got in around that price too, and it's gone up awesome. So,
To be fair, yes, I stuck to kind of my principles, but there is like a lesson to be learned. There is like, my network at that point was now much different than my poker network, right? Poker network was a bunch of guys who had X amount of money, only really knew about poker, didn't know much about investing, kind of like more like me, kind of like I was balanced with a lot of people, right? Whereas once I was kind of in this new group, it was a bunch of people that had like reached way higher levels than me, and like had been through investing large amounts of money in different ways and everything. And one thing I do learn is like you need to be pushed sometimes by these people to like expand your potential. Like I should have at least given more credit to thinking about making that decision. Now, if I never would have invested the 100K at that moment in time, but I look back and I'm like, they actually were trying to push me a little bit to expand even though if they didn't know they were doing that,
right.
They were trying to expand my ability to think bigger, to think about more. Yeah. Stop trying to be such a small ball player. That's never like, you're never going to get outsized results without some outsized volatility and expressing that. And I don't think I learned that for a while. And I actually personally do have a Dan Bilzerian story. I can't believe I brought this dude up twice, but like I played poker with him one day, and it got really high stakes because do you guys know what straddling is?
No. Oh wait,
so it's basically like
where you double down almost.
So basically, imagine the table stakes are like $5, $10, right? And everybody's sitting with like $1,000 or whatever. Well, Bilzerian and like 3 of his buddies came and sat with like 40 grand, and we were all sitting there with like $1,000, $1,500, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna start straddling," which basically means instead of the blinds being $5 and $10 and the normal raise being like $30 or $40, you could go $5, $10, $20, $40, $80. And those are just the blinds. So now the normal raise is going to be 3 times the last blind. So that the normal raise started becoming like $300 rather than 30. So it basically made the game way more hyper aggressive and out of my element than
right
ever.
away. So you're like, just to see the river, you're like, I can't even stick around for that.
You're all in.
They're bleeding.
You're all in right away.
Yeah, got it.
You're all in right away because you only have now a few bets rather than like 100 bets. So I actually ended up winning a hand really early on, and I had like $3 or $4 grand. And like I was playing table limits at the time that was within my bankroll, right? But now I'm in this weird environment where the stakes are way higher than I was ready. It was like a Wednesday night at like 6 o'clock. Like I had no business like having this happen. And I stayed there because I wanted to be cool. Like I didn't want to be the guy that stood up and been like, hey guys, like, look, this is way over my head here. And like, I'm just going to step away for the sake of my bankroll. Like
Right.
I didn't want to like admit that, right? Even though deep down I felt that. And that comes to bite me in the ass because I get into a hand. I had worked my stack up to like 5K, and I get into this hand, and on the river, I had like 2K invested into the pot. On the river, this famous poker player, his name was Twin Caracas online. I'll never forget this. He's this older, like Brazilian dude. He jams the river all in, and I'm sitting there thinking, because I had like 2 pair, but there were 4 to the straight on the board, so all he needed was I think it was a 6 in his hand, right?
Right.
So I'm sitting there, but like again, you got to go back through the hand, figure out would it be possible that he has a 6 here, blah blah blah. But when you have these guys who are playing stakes that don't matter to them, they can have anything. It's really hard to narrow their range. So I'm sitting there thinking, and Bilzerian reaches across the table and grabs my cards, which is a big like a big no. You just
only
like,
he could do that because he's literally Michael Jordan. Be like, kid, move over.
Yeah, just over. Looks at my hand. And then looks back at me and like, what the fuck are you doing, pussy? and then like endearingly, not like not in like an asshole fashion. Like he's actually a really nice guy. I actually like him, but he's him. So like it's done in a weird way. So anyways, he gives me the cards back, and I think for a while, and I end up folding, and he's like, what are you folding for? Don't you know this guy? Like, he's going to show you a bluff. I swear to God, $500 right now. I bet you he's bluffing. Sure enough, the Brazilian dude flips up 2 random cards, didn't have a 6, had nothing. And I'll never forget, I like tucked my tail between my legs. I would have won. I would have doubled up, right? But instead, I lost 2,000 on the hand because I folded. And I stand up from the table, and I just start racking up the remainder of my chips. I'm like, what am I doing here, man? Like, this was so fucking stupid. And then Bilzerian, he kind of like gets up from his chair and he walks around to me and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, look, this is just too much for me. And he's like, don't you realize like you're not going to get many chances like this where like you're going to have a massive edge against a bunch of people who could give a fuck about losing $5 grand. Like you need to like expand your mind a little bit and realize this is a spot you want to be in. And this is the thing this is the spot you work to be in. You don't want to be at the table that's hard and like perfectly played or like whatever. And I still left, but like that never left me. So like there's 2 instances where like people
he's
like,
look at the positive in what appears to be the negative, like almost turn your shirt inside out. Like it's a whole different way of looking at the situation you're in.
And the opportunity.
And you got to be like, hey, you're a gambler, right? And you find yourself in this situation and you're running from it where your edge just massively increased. Like you could play less hands, play a tighter range, like, but you got to be willing to like lose it here. And if you're not, like, what are you even doing here? Like you're never going to reach the potential you want. Now, he's not saying all this to me, but that's eventually kind of what I got from that. And I was like, man, he kind of did me a huge favor there in like expanding how I think about risk and like tolerance and things like that.
It's interesting. I did comedy in my 20s in Chicago. You know, it's kind of the improv capital, and a lot of people, the Belushis and Aykroyd and Bill Murray and all those guys came through here. And I had some of the best teachers around that taught them too. But I was taking a class with, I think it was Tina Fey, and I was just talking to her after. I think the class was getting a drink, and I'm like, yeah, I feel like in this one group I'm kind of getting weeded out. And she goes, no, you don't ever get weeded out. You weed yourself out. And it's like you said, it was one of those moments. And I eventually ended up weeding myself out of comedy in my 20s. I went to business school. I was getting promotions at work. Like I chose the less risk to the more, reward and creative freedom and all that stuff. And I don't regret it, but it's funny because I walked too, yet that always stuck with me and probably benefited me and expanded my mind in other ways.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like those little moments in life, like I like love those type of stories. Doesn't matter where it came from, but like those little moments or whatever, just so impactful.
Yeah. And basically from the trading perspective, like you're kind of saying like you have to, if you're going to be at those tables, right? Like the high frequency memes and stuff like that, like you got to be all in on that. Like you can sit and hold, and that's great. And that can be your approach and the table you want to play, but just be aware of the environment of the table and the games that you're getting in, because if you're halfway in, you're just going to get eaten for breakfast.
Totally. And like, it doesn't mean be like stupid, right? But like, would you mind risking a little bit more than you were comfortable with if you knew the probabilities of success had gone drastically up? Like, you should probably be able to answer yes to that, or else like you got to really evaluate if you're kind of in the right business, right? Because then that goes back to a leak that you're not being aware enough of yourself to like address down the road.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I remember I think when you and I had that long conversation that one morning when you reached out, you had mentioned something like that. So let's do our final transition of the 3-pronged Skigod life and where he is in crypto now. So in crypto, you were a gambler, you had some successes, but you kind of weeded yourself out in trading. You had a lot of successes. It took a while, but you did it. And now you're here in crypto. I assume right now, at least, you're spending more and more time here. What are you good at in crypto?
Yeah, sorry, I go off on tangents and forget your original questions all the time. So,
dude, nobody tangents more than Blutoshi. I will tell you that right now, and I won't bring you home. You at least bring us home. So you're cool, dude.
Yeah. So Belil crypto la whatever, 10 years, 11 years, or whatever it is. I just think I have a lot of time, right? Even though I have 2 kids, like I try more and more to let the trading game come to me. So in the meantime, I really enjoy the crypto space. It's a bunch of people that are similar, right? Kind of techie, kind of risk heavy, just like speculating, like being creative, all these new things pop up here and there. So it's just natural to kind of find your way in there, especially when you already live at a computer in general. So yeah, what am I good at? I would say nowadays, I just think like having an overall plan for what I'm trying to achieve in this space is helping me. And I think finding some success in some of the earlier big trades have really helped me take a sit back and like be like, okay, what am I looking for? I've kind of made some decent money in the space now. Like, what do I really want out of this? So I think I'm peeling back the onion over and over and trying to get rid of all the like excess speculation, even though it's like rampant and I still take part in it. But like, I live in California and there's tax burdens and I have a family. And even though like I probably shouldn't be as aggressively positioned in crypto as I am, which is why I still get emotional, because like,
join the club.
You see 20-30% reduction in your net worth. It's hard to just like, see your kids when they come home from daycare and just act like nothing's ever happened, right? So
Daddy lost $1 million today.
Yeah.
Daddy's down bad.
On JPEGs. I'm sorry. They're not NFTs. They're ordinals, kids. Let me tell you all about them.
They're inscribed.
On chain.
So I try to peel that back year after year. That's why I don't own as much NFTs anymore. That's why I don't do as many memes. Like I pick and choose, but like I have my bag of Bitcoin, I have my bag of Sol, and I'm kind of like, okay, I really would like, if we're just using cycle terms here, liquidity cycle, whatever you want to call it, I would like to like, this would be the one where I want to do very well. I want to kind of rebalance out of crypto mostly. I want to have like Bitcoin only. I don't want anything but Bitcoin in the end. And then I kind of want to just chill. Like I don't really want to be as heavy in the space.
Yeah,
But
and
for now,
you've said that a lot, and that comment fascinates me because, like, I've been lucky. I've had some successes in my company. I'm not super rich by any means, but like I'm older in life. Disco's older in life, and we have families, and we're doing okay. I guess obviously we're doing this show. Like, I love the freedom aspect of it. There's so many other aspects, but you've always talked about, which fascinates me. You've always talked about like, this is your, you got in early to crypto. So like you said, it's almost your trading moment where you had money in the bank and you're like, oh, now Mr. Scary's not in the rearview mirror. I can relax and let stuff comes to me. With Bitcoin, the 2013 moves and the early ETH has allowed you to almost like do that even more so. But like, I guess for me, like this space, there's so many interesting people, but you're saying, no, it's at the end of the day, it's about quality of life. It's about family. It's about real life. And it's about having enough to just retire, surf, do whatever you want, and live comfortably. For me, that's what we're doing now. This is what I would choose to do anyway. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a difference of opinion, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, it's what you want, right? Like I think I would actually be pretty good at content. I just don't want to do content.
It's a grind.
It's a grind. I kind of understand. I've done 20, 30 podcast episodes myself now. I kind of understand, like, the people don't understand, like, trying to getting guests lined up and coordinating and all that. It's like a big part of it that I don't know. A lot of it, I'm just like, meh. I'm one of those people who, I think my end goal now is to play around with AI, personally, do some sort of little fun projects with that. But I'm a dude who I don't need to be work. Like, how a lot of people in this space, they're just like, I love being in here. I'm never going to leave. I don't care if I got super rich. Like, I love this space. These are my people, like blah, blah, blah. Like, I love working. If you love what you do, I'm never going to, nah, I'm out, bro. Like, I'm good. I could spend every day, like, sitting in the sun, going on trail runs, like eating pizza here or there, making nice Negronis, like listening to podcasts, reading books, talking to people like you, just for fun. And I like manage my money over time.
So you do want to be here. Okay.
Yeah. Like, I'll just be bored and I'll reach out to you, but it's with no purpose of like attaining information or money or anything,
Yeah.
So to each their own, I just have this dream of like, I've been more clear on it lately. And it's like Maslow's hierarchy, right? You don't get to really think about these things until you've covered a lot of the boogeyman's on your back, right? You want to take care of the relationships, the family, the security, all that. Only then can you start asking yourself the deeper questions. But like, I'm on my mortality kick right now, right? I'm 37. I'm starting to go deep into the well of like, dude, we only get like 85 years here. And out of those 85, the first 20 are kind of young, irrelevant, kind of, you have this 30-40 window gap of health and like creation here. And like, do I really want to spend it like working my ass off? Some people would say, yeah. And that's like the purpose. I would say, no.
Most people never ask the question, and that's the problem. They don't know that freedom is it has something to do with pocketbook, but it really has to do with how free is your time and your calendar to do what you want when you want.
Right. So going back to the strengths, I want to be able to exit kind of everything, rebalance to a point where I'm like, okay, here I am. This is what I have. Here's my family. Here's my new life. I can still chat with people and network and whatever. I want to make like 1 to 2 big financial decisions a year, whether that be putting some money in here or rebalancing in this fashion because of like the regime we're in. And then I just want to hopefully perform as good as like, inflation's running or better. And like, I'll be happy. That's it. I don't know. So, and I hope shrooms go up.
Yeah,
need shrooms to go up.
You're definitely bullish shrooms. So you did a post yesterday about the question I asked you that we never even got to, because I think this metamorphosis for you was fascinating from poker player to trader to crypto guy. But we were talking about, the US is 35 trillion in debt. You write a great post on it yesterday. I feel like we've all been told over and over, what is it, that our debt is 130+% of GDP. Like at some point that can't stack. And you're saying like I get that the whole world needs the US dollar because basically whatever you have to buy oil in kind of dominates for now at least. But from what I understand, a lot less folks, except for maybe the stable coins like Tether, are buying these treasuries. So for me, it's just a matter of time, but you're just saying that's just the FUD cycle over and over. This could go on for decades.
Yeah, I mean, let me caveat with this. I'm not some macro dude who knows what he's talking about. I just try to take in a bunch of information and try to come up with the best way for me to like manage my own money. But I've been having Global Flows. I don't know if you know him on Twitter, but he's a good friend of mine, and a couple people on Monkey Baby Business that are retired a million times over. I talked to them about this stuff, and they've been around since pre.com. They've seen it all, whatever. And they really expanded my mind on this because in 2020 I became like the macro doomer guy. I love a good narrative. I love it. Yeah, send it all to zero. 70% correction. This is just like these two times, and we're about to experience the great reset. And like the BRICS currency is coming up, and I saw you post something, Game of Trades or whatever, right? Like I used to follow Game of Trades. I can't even follow him anymore because the dude's been wrong for years now, and these people never admit wrong, ever.
Yeah,
they just come up with some next data point that supports their thing. And you can create these data points of these narratives. Sorry, I'll let you go. These data points of these narratives so easily, and they're so seductive.
To get you to join their newsletter, because I looked at that, and that was the recession doom like you talked about. And actually, hats off to Elon and X. I had a scheduled tweet, because what we do is we do these shows, then we schedule the tweets out, and we'll go weeks out to kind of be more efficient. And X hit me up and said, hey, by the way, something that you have in your scheduled tweets actually has community notes. And I looked at the notes, and they're like, actually, this data is not fully representative. So thank God for the community notes, because I came to the same conclusion you just said. I'm like, I'm not going to use their data anymore, specifically because once I saw the community notes, it made me realize that they were using that to just get more subscribers. It's like Peter Schiff. He's like, Bitcoin, like, you're an idiot from this particular day in 2017 or 2021 or whatever, when Bitcoin was at 74,000, you're down 28% now. Like, he grabs the handles and puts them wherever and then says that gold is above it. You're like, dude, like, if you had bought Bitcoin from the day you started fudding it, if you spent $100 a day and just kept dollar cost averaging in, you'd be like a trillionaire. You wouldn't even have to work, but he's his own meme now. So it's the same like doomer FUD. Basically, you turn into the character that you play on TV, and you just have to live like you're Arthur Fonzarelli. And every time someone looks at you, like, hey, like gold.
Well, it's a great
that
point.
One?
Like,
dated fucking references.
That you are old, dude. Jesus Christ.
You have no idea.
But like now take the NASDAQ and replace Bitcoin with NASDAQ and give that same thing to every macro doomer that's come out for the past 3-4 years. They'd all be up 100%. And, even if they now crush their big reset trade, that's probably not going to happen. And they're probably not going to sell the top and then buy the bottom. Like, I had to like let that go and figure that like a big part of the reason I'm attracted to these stories is because they can make the data look exactly to make sense. And you're going to deep down be like, wow, that actually makes a ton of sense. And we're right at that moment. And then like, I think the big kicker for me is like the reason I'm so attracted to it is because I'm so scared to be the guy who buys the high. right? Like you just like we're all, we're so invested in crypto and all this stuff, but we're way out on the risk curve. So like to get over your ego and to just buy the S&P 500 and shut up is like feels like such a bitch move that like any like story of the Great Reset or this recession or whatever just sounds so much more fun to be like, screw the government, the Fed sucks. And like, dude, Jerome Powell is a legend. This dude, in the face of everything, has been guiding his little G7 plane down for a great little landing. Real wages are going up. Like unemployment has risen a little bit. Like, okay, but they expected that. The market knows it. Inflation has been down only. I expect it to be, yeah, maybe it's a little sticky around here, but I expect it over time to kind of keep going down. And as long as we don't have this energy inflation spikes, which, by the way, are going to be less and less because America is energy independent now. We produce more oil than like anybody else in the world. Now, if it was only the Saudis creating all the oil and dictating the price, well, that's a little bit of a different story. They could play a game there, but like it's become so like less relevant in the gameplay here. And I think growth is going to be like, you start talking about like technology, right? And like deflation, like the price of tomorrow. Jeff Booth's book's pretty good on that. But like over time, we're going to just be more and more productive in my eyes. Companies' earnings are going to stay pretty strong. And like, I just think we're in a bull market for like, I don't know, until the next fucking whatever crisis, insert X crisis, like how are we really going to know when the next crisis is? But like, COVID, we've picked out every single black swan available and just start yelling it on Twitter. Taiwan invasion, Middle Eastern war, BRICS currency, nuclear war. Putin's like gone crazy. Right. He's locked in a room by himself. Nobody trusts him. How do you know? Like, like this whole time you could have just been dollar cost averaging like every other fucking 401k employee and be richer than you were.
And
but like,
up,
nah.
Yeah. I've made that mistake for years with my portfolio. I'm like, it's all good. Like it's coming, it's crashing. You may be right. You're always right, because there's always going to be a big correction at some point. But to think that you could even get it within 3 to 6 months to a year, if you get it within 10 years for the big black swan, you might be lucky. And I finally kind of realized that lesson older in life. So I guess I'd pivot a little and just ask, like, if you're not like the 35 trillion in debt, you're saying, just like Volcker, Powell's landing this airplane with a plum and demure. That's a big word on Twitter, I guess, right now. But he's doing a great job landing this plane, in your opinion. So do you see yourself, or is part of your long-term plan, do you think, to hold a lot of your net worth in Bitcoin? Or hell no, you're going to be a split or always more fiat and normie world than the Bitcoin world?
Yeah, I'm not like an all or nothing dude. Like I don't see the point in having like all my money in Bitcoin or whatever. So I've over time expressed some money into real estate stuff. I still think real estate is probably the biggest, like I'm still learning about it, but it seems like the biggest tactic for rich people to stay rich or get richer, like with all the like tax benefits there. So I think if I could dream up a portfolio, it's like 50% real estate, 20 to 25% Bitcoin, and like 25% just stocks, and just shutting up. And like, I think debasement continues over time. So I think all those assets should do generally well. And that's kind of that. Like, I just think, to your point, like you're just good luck being the person that finds the top and the bottom. And in the, like, even if you play that perfectly, we probably go back up to highs within a few years after stimulating and easing conditions or whatever. Right. Anyway, because I only feel like I have a little bit of like a milkshake theory guy where I feel like the US has like a giant melt up kind of golden era run before, like way more than it is now. And it already is like the king. Like I just think like this is like the only kind of place to be I don't see the currency dying. I don't see the trust going away. I think people are going to be buying bonds here for a while. I don't really know that there's that great of data saying that there's actually massive amounts of global funds and everything not buying American debt. Like, I don't know if I believe that one. You could probably prove me wrong with certain charts or whatever. Like, yeah, maybe China's buying a little bit less or whatever. But when Janet Yellen goes over and talks to Ueda and talks to President Xi and they have their little meetings, like, what do you think they're doing over there? Like, sorry, Janet, it's been nice working with you. Like, good luck. We're gonna bomb you later. Like, no,
let's all fail
they're
together. Yeah, right. So you're saying they're colluding, they're keeping everything stable, and their production with our money system or whatever the agreements are. You're saying they work out the tensions because they want to get richer too.
Yeah, if there's any conspiracy to me, it's only gonna benefit like the things we're owning in the end anyway. Have my scary pills for like if the Democrats or whatever keep attacking us and then they win in a landslide somehow, and like Gary Gensler is now moving. I'm sure there's some really bearish ideas, but yeah, I don't know, man. It all seems pretty set up well to me for a good run.
Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank God we can still hear you, but even your video's freezing. So I don't know.
I think my video froze.
Yeah, I don't know who has the bad reception, but we can hear you loud and clear, and you're frozen in a perfect spot. But you didn't get to do the 2-fingered mic drop, so unfortunately, you didn't get that one. But we've got you frozen in a pretty good frame right here. So I don't know, Disco. This has been fascinating for me. Do you have any other questions for Skigod?
No, I mean, I love that the conversation ended at a point that I didn't expect in the beginning. And I feel, relatively more secure overall based on, some of the things that were said. And I just think my biggest takeaway is, everything is about self-awareness. And the more that you understand that, and the more that you put yourself in environments with which you feel more comfortable, or you feel that you have, I guess, edge is the term, right? If you have, a strength there, then go towards it. So we don't, it's great for people to pick where they want to be and what they are, but you don't necessarily have to define yourself just as one, because that's what you're kind of getting peered into almost from, kind of the timeline. So it was a great kind of escape from just the timeline information to really just kind of sit back and be like, things look like they're going to be okay. And it's okay to do what makes you feel comfortable, and you have your own path and progression. So I really love the conversation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Skigod, do you have any closing thoughts for us before we sign off? This has been really enlightening. And like Disco said, this conversation, the progression was way different than I thought, but I feel like seeing that progression, I learned a lot more to kind of see how a poker player could turn into a trader, into a crypto person, and what his kind of macro outlook is. It's a neat progression to that I learned a ton from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing is, like, I've been working on this a bit more lately, is to just be more grateful about everything I have and where I am and like what I'm trying to do, and to stop comparing myself to other people as much. Like, that's been a big breakthrough, and I think everybody could use a little bit of that. And then especially on the timeline stuff, just be careful of the timeline. Like, we're at a seemingly red-pilled, death-filled, bearish, doomer timeline, and that could be interesting, and if you feel like you're at the tip of the spear and it's a free speech and all that, but it could also be pretty dark, and it's no wonder that you can end up just like kind of thinking it's all over. So if you're certain accounts, man, just like look at those accounts, go down their feed, and like if something really triggers you or makes you think like, yeah, this is it, this is the one, like go down their feed and see if they've been pretty dialed for the last few months, or if they've just been repeating the same bullshit. Crypto too, the guys that you think have all these good calls, like do a little investigation and see if they're actually making some money, because let me tell you, there's a lot of people losing out there.
Oh, for sure. And these guys, when they have bad calls, like some of these consortiums, these influencer groups, like they'll cover their tracks and delete. Thank God we have people like Zach and Truth Labs and some of these guys to follow the chain, and you see how just colludey and corrupt some of this stuff is. But yeah, it's Disco and I talk about this on the show all the time. Like when if it's all FOMO on the timeline, like is that your time to jump in? Like I always say, like if you want to buy that ordinal or rune or whatever, like if you wait 3 weeks when the light's not shine on it, you think it'll be more or less then. And some of them do keep going up, and you got to follow your instincts, but you can't follow your instincts when that gut pang is a fear instinct, right? For missing out. And the same is on the FUD side too. Like when everything's red candled, like you said, I probably didn't put as big of a bet as you. And I've actually learned from this conversation, but in 2020, in March or April or whatever, when Bitcoin went under 5,000, I bought a couple Bitcoin. I certainly at that point in my life had the funds to buy more. Like you said, I understood the trade. I was like, there's no way this keeps going down. Like this is free. And I just bought a couple, and, I easily could have bought 10 or 20, but, shoulda, coulda, woulda. But it's a great example of like, sometimes as long as it's not, you don't think it's FOMO, like, oh my God, this is like, if you're saying in your brain, this is my big one, this is my chance to retire, you're probably, like you said, what'd you call it, a leak or something? Like there's probably a personality trait that's effing you right now that's going to screw you. But if you're just stay humble and really like follow your gut, and it's not as fear-based, and you can stay more neutral, like that, you might make that trade, maybe put a little more on. Don't bet what you can't afford to lose and stuff, especially when you have families. But that makes all the difference in the world, and that's what I'm going to take away from this interview. This has been absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and don't forget, you need to outperform Bitcoin if you're putting money to work. Like think about if it's going to outperform Bitcoin or not, because if we do see a run here, which I'm hoping we do. By the way, every podcast or story or whatever I do, we tend to follow it up with like me saying I'm really bullish, and then it goes down like 20 or 30%. So right. Enjoy the crash, boys.
Exactly.
The crash could be an opportunity. It'll be okay.
Yeah. So Disco, has this been financial advice?
Nothing that we do is financial advice. This is purely for entertainment purposes only. Do your own research. Make sure that you don't invest more than you can afford to lose, and just be careful. And as we're saying, really kind of vet the information. Don't just run off of what you're hearing, and make sure that you take that extra time and maybe have a little more time to kind of process something, to make sure you have a strategy. So appreciate it very much, Ski.
Absolutely. So
thanks,
Skigod, thank you very much, sir. And take care, everybody. Till next week.